excited to introduce Trademarks. She owns Trademark Flower Farm, Clifton Springs, and she's traveled all this way. I'm going to talk about her amazing business. So she's not only a cut flower grower, but she's got an incredible business brain. And she actually presented in our cut flower risk management series and talked about all about crop planning. So now she's really going to help you drill down on profitability, which is ultimately why we're all doing it. Very fun and beautiful to grow flowers. At the end of the day, if you're not making a profit, really use it. Think about what you're doing. We're in good shape. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I'm just gonna hand it over to Debbie.
Awesome. Well, hi, I haven't gotten a real introduction in years. Yeah, doesn't it feel weird to actually like see people again? Like all the people who are virtual, I'm like, please come hang out with us so we can actually socialize again. But thank you for the introduction, Carla, and thanks for having me. I am Jenny. You guys can call me Jennifer. Jennifer is only like only my mom calls me that, so feel free to call me Jenny, and I own Trademarks Flower Farm in Clifton Springs. Just out of curiosity, who here has never farmed before and will be going into their first year farming? Anybody? Okay, one person, awesome. How about second year farming? Third, fourth, 5 and above. Oh, wow, we got a lot of experienced people. Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So how many of you have sat down and actually calculated how much profit you're making from each one of your flowers or enterprises? Oh, it's naughty. All right, well, I'm going to teach you guys how to do that today.
And we have a first year in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Fantastic. Why aren't we moving? Am I hitting the wrong one?
I might need to hit the screen again.
I guess that's all fine.
Okay. Yeah, let's get you back into PowerPoint. Okay, try now.
Awesome. All right. So just to give you a little bit of background about our story, just because I think it will be helpful to some of you guys who are maybe just starting out. We started growing flowers in 2016. I have been involved in all kinds of agriculture for my whole life, grew up doing dairy farming and like went into every different sector of agriculture, veggies, fruit, livestock, whatever. But we bought an abandoned farm, and it wasn't even really a farm. It was like a piece of land with a really crappy house on it, and decided after trying to grow veggies and do a veggie CSA and failing at it miserably because our area is really flooded with a lot of veggie farmers, that I'd start growing flowers, and then it kind of took off. So we grow roughly 1 acre of flowers. We grow a lot of flowers in that 1 acre area. And our main markets right now are florists, bouquet subscriptions, a CSA, and we go to 1 farmer's market. So we have 1 full-time employee besides myself. I'm full-time on the farm. And then depending on the time of year and what's going on, maybe like 2 to 4 part-time employees filing in and out. So come on in, grab a seat. But we specialize in really early spring flowers, mostly grown in hoop houses, specifically ranunculus. That's our #1 flower on our farm. And when we bought our place, we didn't have anything on the farm at all. It was all like overgrown fields and kind of like a hopeless situation. But over the years, we have built a 20 by 40 propagation house, 4 unheated high tunnels, and we currently have 2 more under construction right now. So hopefully those will be up and running by summertime. A bunch of other like equipment barns, like tool shed, and then a brand new flower processing barn. So I'm telling you guys this because we literally started from absolutely nothing. And because we prioritized growing profitable flowers, we were able to put a lot of money back into the farm and grow. So we have all these structures. So there's me and my hubby and our little Maisie dog. We have another dog too, and soon we'll have another baby to join the family on the farm. I keep joking that like in 5 years we'll have free labor, which I'm really excited about. Maybe like 10 years, but yeah. But I started this farm as a side hustle. So I had a full-time job, just started going to farmers markets, doing weddings and pop-ups at night after my regular job, worked really hard. And over time, slowly built up the business to the point where I could replace my off-farm job income with my on-farm. So it's definitely possible. People ask me all the time, like, can you do it? The answer is yes, but you have to work really, really hard if you're not already there. But in order to do this, in order to make enough money to pay yourself a reasonable wage, so I'm saying everybody has their own idea of what that is, but not be totally poor, you have to prioritize highly profitable products. And today we're going to be talking about flowers. But how do you know what's profitable and what's not if you've never run your numbers? That's what I'm going to be teaching you how to do today. So we're going to be talking about doing enterprise budget analyses, which is a really boring word for something that's super, super important. But basically, I'm going to show you the process of doing an enterprise budget analysis so you can see what's profitable and what's not. And most importantly, if we had more time, we could talk a lot more about it today, but how to make adjustments to make your flowers more profitable than what they are now. So it's not the sexiest subject, but it's very important. So I had to put in a slide of flowers just because most of the slides are like boring spreadsheets, but don't judge me too much on that. It's just the subject matter. So you calculate profitability by performing this enterprise budget analysis. It's also called crop costing, calculating profitability. There's a bunch of different names, but essentially the same process. So if you've ever actually wondered what flowers are making money, what's not, there's probably some things that are losing you money and you might not be aware of that. This process is going to help you. Before I knew how to do this, I was really just shooting in the dark. I was looking at what other people were doing on Instagram and I was like, yeah, I'm going to grow a ton of calendula. And who grows calendula? Oh, good. It's terrible. It's like the stickiest flower and it's like so, I hated harvesting it. Yeah, so much work and like harvesting all those little stems. Anyways, so I was just like growing everything. And when I first did this process, I realized that I'm actually not making money on a lot of the things that are taking a lot of my effort and time. So after doing this, I have managed to double my profits and revenue multiple years in a row. So it's a big deal when you sit down and actually run the numbers. So it's the only way to know if the flowers you're growing are truly profitable or not. And just as a side note, I wanted to throw this slide in here because you can use this process to see how profitable your other enterprises are. So if you're a farm that grows other things besides flowers, if you do livestock and veggies, you can use it for that, compare your enterprises, obviously your crops. So like today, we're going to be talking about, zinnias versus peonies, dahlias, etc. But also your sales outlets. So if you have multiple sales outlets, you can compare what your profit margin is using the same process. So it's also useful for kind of projecting your profit or gross revenue. Either way, it's really invaluable information that is going to influence all of your business decisions. So you need to treat your business like, well, a business. You can use this process to make adjustments, to make more money, plan out the season ahead, do some advanced business planning. It's just really, really important because it gives you an idea of where your money's coming in and what is losing money. So just because someone says zinnias or dahlias or whatever are so profitable doesn't mean that it is for you. You can't make blanket statements like that because we all have different growing techniques. We grow in different areas and we all do things a little bit differently, and that all affects your bottom line. So an enterprise budget analysis, in order to do this, the plain Jane, basically what it is, you're going to list all of your expenses associated with growing one flower crop, and then all of your income, and then just see if there's any money left over. Okay, that's like the basic part of it. It's a little more complicated than that, but we're going to list our variable costs, fixed costs, and then we're not going to go over stuff like a break-even analysis or establishment costs for perennials. That's done a little bit differently. We don't have enough time to go over that today, but just so you know that you can kind of dive into this a little bit deeper, and then comparing it to your income. So take this information home and you can use it for other parts of your business as well. Just a disclaimer, there are many different ways to do this. I'm showing you a basic overview of how I do my calculations. Other people do it differently, but you can get really, really detailed into this, or you can make it a little bit more basic at first, just to get the grasp of it. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys a calculation on how much money you're making per bed and per bunch, but you can also calculate per stem, per acre, per hoop house, per square foot, whatever makes most sense for you and the size of your farm. Okay. In order to do this properly, you guys really need to be keeping good records. So make sure you guys are actually keeping track of the information that is included on here. So do I have my little, no, I guess I wanted to put a little thing about record keeping in here. It's in the slideshow somewhere. I thought it was next, but it's not. So I use Excel. Does pretty much everyone in here use like Excel or some kind of spreadsheet? Yeah. Okay. If not, like you can do this in pen and paper, but it's so much easier if you just use a spreadsheet, Google spreadsheets, Excel, whatever. And the example we're going to be going through today is one bed of stock or Madiola. Does everybody know what stock is? Okay, cool. So standardizing your calculations is going to make this a lot easier so you can compare apples to apples. The most important thing is keeping everything standardized across the board when you compare your zinnias to your dahlias to your ranunculus, peonies. So on my farm, everything is standardized. So all of our growing beds are 30-inch by 100-foot long. Your farm may not have that, but I highly recommend that you do that. But if you don't, if you grow, if you have a 25-foot bed of ageratum and a 100-foot bed of dahlias or whatever, just make sure when you do these calculations, you are pretending you're growing like a 1-foot bed of everything so you can compare apples to apples. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about that? Okay. So how profitable is one bed of stock? I thought about having you guys like guess as to what we're going to come up with at the end here, but there's so many different variables and you can come up with so many different numbers that I think we'll just skip on over that. So let's get right into the actual breakdown. So we're going to actually go to there's my record stuff. We're going to be working within a spreadsheet here. So just to give you guys an idea, this is like the beginning of my spreadsheet that I use. And I just have the same format and I just like copy and paste and then take out plug-in numbers as needed. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Whoops. So breaking things up into categories is really useful. I like to break things up into my pre-harvest costs, post-harvest costs, and then fixed overhead costs for all of your different expenses, because there's so many different expenses that go into growing flowers. Within your pre-harvest costs, you're going to be looking at all different variables. We'll go over that: materials, labor, utilities, post-harvest costs, such as like your packaging, flower sleeves, labor that comes with harvesting, and then your fixed overhead costs for your whole entire farm. And then we're going to look at your average price perceived per bunch and put it all together to figure out how much money we're making. So step one, here's my little thing about records. Keeping track of gross sales from individual flower crops is really useful for lots of different reasons. But most importantly for this process, you really need to keep track of the time it takes to do specific tasks. So do you guys know how much time exactly it takes you to fill like your seed trays, like 50-cell seed trays? How long it takes you to seed that, how long it takes you to transplant one bed at 9-inch spacing, 6-inch spacing, weeding, watering, fertilizing, spraying, harvesting, processing. This is a lot of stuff to keep track of. And I know we don't have a lot of time on the farm, but I literally would just take out my phone, set the timer, do something, click stop, look at it. And I have a page in my notebook, just a blank page where I write down, seeded one bed of whatever, it took me this long. Okay. And then have your employees do that as well, because your employees will be a lot slower than you, guaranteed. Hate to say it, but maybe someday I'll get a really fast employee, but I haven't yet. So here is an example of my record keeping sheet. You can see that up here at the top, I just have the bed number. So this is for my second succession of ranunculus for this year. And we just have some details at the top with, variety, succession, seeding date, number of trays, the tray size, total number of transplants, the date, location, all that stuff. But then down here, I have this split into 2 different sections. So I don't know if my little laser pointer, oh, it does work. It's kind of split down the middle here. It's kind of hard to see, but this side over here is for all labor. And then this side over here is for materials and equipment. So I literally just list tasks and I put down how long it takes me. So for example, week 48 on November 27th, I cleaned and disinfected all of the buckets that we use to soak our ranunculus forms in. Took me 15 minutes to do that, so 0.25 of an hour. And my labor rate, I calculate at $25 an hour. So 0.25 times $25 an hour is $6.25. So it cost me $6.25 to clean and disinfect my buckets. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so for all of everything that you do, so I counted out a bunch of different successions, like figuring out how many of whatever variety. I filled trays with soil, then I potted them up into the trays. Then I transplanted them, and it took me a couple of days to transplant with some help. Putting frost cloth on and off. I mean, that's something that we're doing all the time in the winter. And then all of my materials and equipment, I list over here. So that includes soil for your seeding, the actual corms themselves that you're purchasing, including shipping. Greenhouse heat, the trays, your hoop house bed. So if you guys grow in hoop houses, you can figure that out, how much it actually costs. Anytime you plant something in your hoop house, like you paid money for that hoop house, so you have to allocate a cost to that. We can go over how to calculate that stuff in detail at the end if there's questions about it, but just basically making a listing of all of your labor and all of your materials and equipment. You don't have to do all the math and everything during the season, just jot down like your time or whatever. And then in the winter, when you have more time to actually sit down and do the calculations, you can do that. All right, so here's just a picture of my record books over the years. I just keep, it's super simple. Like I made this spreadsheet in Excel, I print off a bunch of them, and then I stick it in a little notebook that has like a waterproof covering that I carry on the farm with me. And at the end of every day, I take some time to jot down what we did that day into this notebook. So if you're worried about record keeping, this is a relatively easy and non-technical way to do it. Cell phones are great. You can make notes in your cell phone, whatever. So now that you have kept accurate records, and even if you haven't done that up until this point, you can still kind of sit down and do this process, but just guesstimate how long things are going to take you. We're going to list all of our pre-harvest variable costs. So this is everything that is associated with growing a specific crop. So we're going to talk about everything associated with growing one bed of stock. So for your materials, that includes your seeds, potting soil, seed trays, weed barrier, any mulches that you use, netting, fertilizers, soil amendments, fungicides, insecticides, herbicides, strip tape, irrigation, stakes. Wow, flowers are getting really expensive to grow all of a sudden. There's a lot of things involved. In addition to your labor, which is your number one, probably, if it's not right now, probably will become your number one expense on the farm. So efficient labor can make a big difference on your bottom line as well. So here is my spreadsheet that I showed you guys earlier. You can see that up at the top, I have stock Matiola, and this is iron variety. So this is one single stem per plant. It's not like the branching variety that you get multiple stems from. And I just have up here at the top, the unit is always the same. We're always calculating in our pretend world that we're growing a full 30-inch by 100-foot bed, right? Spacing that I use on my farm, actually we switched to 4-inch, but for this example, we're planting at 5-inch spacing in a grid, which means we can fit 1,440 plants per bed. Like you guys know all this stuff from doing your crop planting. And then I always put directly at the cost my seed or my plug cost, just because it's really easy to stick it up there. And I think that it's important to consider what your actual costs are for this. For example, if you need 1,440 seeds and you're going to plant, a few more than that in your trays in case of germination loss. So you're probably going to buy 2 seed packets worth. So if a seed packet is say $20, your cost is actually going to be $40 here. And I think that was a typo, so it should say 40. So make sure you're not just saying, okay, 1,440 seeds, that would cost this amount of money. Like your costs are actually more than that. All right. So this first section, we're listing all of our pre-harvest costs. So you're just going to list everything that's associated with the flower, growing it from seed to just before harvest. Okay. I put a little section here for bed prep. So we grow our stock in a hoop house. So we're not doing any like tractor work or anything. So you're just gonna list all of your labor and all of your materials for getting ready for that. And a quick note about labor rates. I calculate my labor rate at $25 an hour, but no one on the farm gets paid that much. Does anybody know why? Why would I account for more time than what, like if my labor rate is $14 an hour, why am I calculating it at 25 an hour? Anybody?
There's so many other expenditures.
Exactly. So if you're paying your employees, let's say $14 an hour, you're actually paying closer to $20 an hour because you have payroll fees and expenses, payroll taxes, workers' compensation insurance, disability and FMLA insurance, unemployment insurance. Welcome to the great state of New York. We have to pay all this stuff. In the interest of our employees, of course. We love and we want to take care of. So you also need to account for miscellaneous time. It's like how much time is on the farm directly spent growing things, a lot, but there's also time spent where you're in meetings or you're transporting things back and forth, or you're just working on some random project, cleaning up the barn or whatever. That all kind of needs to be accounted for a little bit as well. And you also need to account for your own time as the owner, which demands a higher pay rate than what you're paying your employees. And if you don't have any employees yet, chances are you probably will someday, but you know, I don't want to go over all the things, but as a business owner, you need to pay yourself more than your employees. You're carrying all the financial and legal risk, all the things getting your farm up and running. So when you're calculating your labor rate, just keep that in mind when you pick a number. So I kind of want to skip down through to our pre-harvest costs for our labor, materials, and other stuff. So you can see I just have a list that is pretty much anything, any task that could ever be associated with growing flowers over here. And like I said before, I use the same spreadsheet, copy and paste it. You'll see a lot of empty slots here because we don't pre-soak our stock seeds. We don't, well, this should be in potting up. I guess I should have proofread this a little bit more, but you know, things that don't apply to certain flower crops, I just leave blank so I can use the same spreadsheet for everything. You don't have to do that. I find it easiest, but for example, for labor, potting up, it should say seeding our trays. If we're planting 12 128 trays, and it takes me 12 minutes to seed one of those trays, which I know because when I was doing it, I hit my little timer on my phone. That's 2.5 hours of seeding. So it costs $55. I think my labor rate is actually calculated at $22 an hour here because this spreadsheet is kind of old. But now that you guys are going to start looking at these numbers, you're really going to start thinking about like time is money. So 2.5 hours, that's $55 out of your pocket. Then when you're transplanting, it's going to take 4 hours of time. That's $88. Wire weeding and hoeing. Please don't hand weed stuff. You're going to lose money on it. $11 an hour because that takes about half an hour to do one whole bed of stock. So you guys getting the hang of this now? Everybody understands, all right. So keeping track of your labor time, putting all that in this little section over here. So materials and equipment, things you need to keep track of, your trays, potting soil, any amendments that you use, fertilizer, drip tape, irrigation fittings, whatever. This is a great wintertime task to sit down and look at all of your receipts and figure out how much stuff actually costs. So for example, for like drip tape, if you have 2 lines of drip tape, that means that you're using 200 feet of drip tape. Look at how much comes on a roll, how much you paid for it, and do the calculation to figure out the cost. So not exactly the most fun thing to do, but really eye-opening and will really help you cut down on your costs if you understand what they actually are. So a really good wintertime task. It's January. We all got a little extra time on our hands right now. So after we do all of those costs, we're going to just make a list of all of our utility and infrastructure costs. So greenhouse heat, your irrigation and well pump, cooler electricity costs, hoop house, other utilities. This is stuff I never considered to be a part of an expense directly growing a specific flower crop until I learned how to do this. And I was like, oh yeah, we actually like run a lot of irrigation and that costs a lot of money. And our cooler, I'm sure my electricity bill keeps going up and up and up because we are using our cooler all the time. And because does it keep going up? Because it just keeps going up. I don't know if anybody else's electricity bill has like doubled this year, but. So remember, we're listing everything only associated with growing this one bed of stock. So greenhouse heat for trays. I allocate $5.49 per tray. Just in general over the whole farm, and we use 12 trays. So that comes out to $65.88. Does anyone have an idea of how I came up with this $5.49 for greenhouse heat? So what you're going to do is you're going to total all of the propane. If you guys heat with propane, I imagine most people do for their greenhouse, all the propane costs for the entire year. And then you're going to look at the number of trays you put in your greenhouse for the entire year and just divide your total propane costs by the number of trays that are going in and out of your greenhouse. And that's how I came up with this $5.49 per tray. This might not always be accurate, like perfectly accurate. You're going to be making a lot of estimations here, but the important part is to make some kind of estimation and keep it standardized across the board. So if you're, we're talking about zinnias, for example, and you use 12 trays of zinnia or 6 trays of zinnias, you'll just take 549 times 6. Okay. And you could get super detailed with this, like get even more in depth with exactly how much. But for me, this is good enough to figure out how much money I'm spending. Okay. So same with running your irrigation and your cooler. I actually do my cooler cost per bunch. So if we expect to get 140 bunches from this one bed, I just times that by 12 cents per bunch. And I kind of did that the same way as my greenhouse heat. I looked at my overall electricity cost for my cooler, how many bunches are in and out of there, and it's good enough. All right. So here's where things get really interesting, because I know up until now, not super interesting. We have our total pre-harvest cost per bed. So all of these things that we just figured out, all of our materials, equipment, our labor, all of our utilities associated with growing one bed of stock. So to grow one bed of stock on my farm, it cost me $631.25. Did anyone think it was going to be that much? Because I didn't. I was like, oh crap, that's a lot of money. So this is how you figure out your pre-harvest cost per bed. You just list everything associated with growing one bed. But if you want to figure out how much per bunch or per stem, all you do is take your expected yield. We're going to talk about bunches today because that's what we do on my farm, and just divide it by this number. So $631 divided by a yield of 141 bunches, I'm sorry, 140 bunches, comes out to $4.51 per, come on over.
The handouts of life.
Awesome. So they have handouts for you guys, so you can kind of take these home and refer to them. I also have some information on my website you guys can refer to as well. But so yeah, you just take this 140 is our expected yield and divide it by your pre-harvest cost. And so your pre-harvest cost per bunch is costing you $4.51. We haven't even talked about post-harvest costs yet. So you can see how this is all adding up really quickly. All right, so yeah, we just talked about this. Pre-harvest cost $631, our expected yield is 140. Pre-harvest cost per bunch is $4.51. So this is a really handy thing to look at because it's showing you how much money is tied up in growing this crop from seed to harvest time. And if you don't harvest half of this bed, you're throwing away $300 and something. So if you're a farm that has this beautiful flower field with all kinds of flowers everywhere that you never harvest because it's so pretty to look at, you're going to start seeing dollar signs like flying everywhere. Okay, as every farm, there is always some overproduction or underproduction. We can never get it perfect, but we want to try to minimize that as much as possible. Yeah.
How many stems are in each bunch?
Yeah, sorry, 10 stem bunches. Great question. Sorry, I like automatically on our farm, we do almost everything in 10 stem bunches. So this would be 1,400 stems, which if you remember from the very beginning, this is, actually probably not accurate because I said we'd have 1,440 plants, and not every single stem is going to be usable. So really, you're probably looking at about, if you're a really good grower, 5 to 10% less than this. But for simplicity, I like even numbers and I'm bad at math, which is why I use Excel. So I was really bad at math in school. All right, so now we're gonna list all of our post-harvest costs. So now we talked about everything involved with growing the flower from seed to the moment it's ready to be harvested. Now we're gonna look at from the time you harvest it to the time it's in the buyer's hands, all the materials associated with that. So rubber bands, any post-harvest solutions that you use, if you use holding hydration solutions, packaging, the labor to put that packaging together. So if you buy like the sleeves and you buy your stickers and you put the sticker on the sleeve, like that costs money to do. So make sure you're accounting for all that, and your harvest rate. So I just quickly want to talk about your harvest rate because this is a very important factor that can make or break your break-even analysis. So you can either make a lot of money or lose a lot of money. And so I don't know if I have. So I'll come back to that actually. Yeah. So here we have all of our post-harvest costs. I don't know if you guys can't see, but underneath this little recording thing, it says post-harvest costs. So we have our harvest rate, which I'll come back to in 1 second, our sleeving rate. So we harvest the bunches, stick them in a sleeve. Then all the materials are here. So holding solution hydration, our stickers and our sleeves. And then I also include cleanup and bed flipping here. So if there's something special that you do with a crop that takes a little bit longer, I usually put that information in here as well. But back to our harvest rate. Calculating your harvest rate, all you have to do is divide the number of bunches you harvest per hour by your labor rate. So let's say you harvest 15 bunches of stock in 1 hour, that's the average that you are able to harvest. You just divide that by your labor rate, which in this example is $22. And that means that it's costing you $1.47 per bunch just to harvest it, right? This is really slow for stock. If your harvest rate is 30 bunches an hour, which is about what it probably should be, your harvest cost is only 73 cents per bunch, which is nearly 50% less. So just by moving faster, you guys are making double the money here. So if you are someone who is slow at harvesting, learn how to go faster. Teach your employees how to go faster. This is really important. We spend a lot of time harvesting, so this is something to be aware of. All right. So now we're just going to total all those post-harvest costs, and we're going to do the same thing we did with our pre-harvest costs. You just total all of those numbers together. So per bed, our total post-harvest cost is $12.53. We divide it by 140 bunches is what we expect to get. That means it's $2.78 is our post-harvest costs per bunch. So this is another good thing to look at because, as you can see, most of the money in producing a flower crop is tied up in everything before you even harvest it. So like I said before, if you're leaving a lot of flowers unharvested, grow less, you'll make more money. That's what we all want, right? Okay, so this next step might be a little overwhelming for you guys. This is where we calculate our fixed overhead costs, and this is everything that is involved with your farm outside of growing one bed of stock. So if you want to skip this step when you get started, you can still kind of tell what flowers are profitable, which ones are not. However, it is a major factor that might determine a lot of the flowers on your farm unprofitable. So what we're doing here is we're taking all of the expenses associated with running our farm and totaling them. So that includes your mortgage, your phone, property taxes, the millions of insurances that we have to pay, repairs, maintenance, website, marketing, office supplies. There's a lot here. I'm not gonna go through everyone, but all this other stuff are very, very real costs that are required to run your farm. And you have to make sure you're making enough money from your flowers to cover these costs, okay? So what I do on my farm, because I like simplicity, you can get super nitty gritty with this, but to make it simple and easy, I take all of these costs, I add them up, and I divide by the total number of growing beds on my farm. So let's just say this all adds up to $100,000. That's probably a lot for my farm, but, and you have 10 growing beds. What's 100,000 divided by 10? Exactly, so you would allocate that to every single bed on your farm. So you can do this a little bit more complicated, and you can kind of look at the percentage of beds on your farm that are used for stock versus dahlias or whatever. That's too much for me. This is good enough for me to give me an idea as to whether it's paying for itself or not. So basically, if a crop on your farm is not paying for these costs, it's not earning its keep. At least that's how I do things on my farm. All right. So oh look, I even have an example. If your overhead costs are $54,400 and you have 85 beds on the farm, you just divide that 54,400 divided by 85, 640 per bed. So automatically, every single calculation you make is you're just going to have this calculation in here, divided by your expected yield, and so here you get $4.50 per bunch. So that's a lot. That's a lot of money. Okay. There's a lot of things that can affect this. The more flowers you get from a bed, the lower this cost is going to be. That's probably the most significant one. And it costs a lot of money to run a farm. So make sure you guys are doing this. All right, so now we're going to take all of our total costs and add them all up. So all of our pre-harvest costs, all of our post-harvest costs, and our overhead, and we're just adding those together. So here's the bottom of our spreadsheet. We have total pre-harvest costs. So remember, we got $4.51 per bed or per bunch. Total post-harvest cost was $2.78 per bunch, and our total overhead cost was $4.57. So that comes out to a total of $11.86 is what it costs you to produce one bunch of stock. Yeah. You guys are gonna cry when you do this. You're not. So this might be an extreme example, but if you're only charging $12 per bunch, which right now is kind of on the low end retail for stock, whoops, that means you're making 14 cents in profit, which is only 1%. So is it worth your time to grow a bed of stock in this way? Probably not. Not for me. Not for me, at least. So, but it's okay if you come up with this, because there are things you can do to increase your profit, which is awesome. So I'm gonna give you guys some really good information at the end of this to change this. So, but does everyone get how we figured out our costs per bunch? And then down here we have our cost per bed too. So it's just totaling, taking, per bed versus per bunch. So down here, maybe even a little bit more eye-opening, for an entire bed of stock that you painstakingly grew from seed means that you're probably going to make less than $20 from it. So, all right. Calculating profit and profit margin, you're just subtracting. So we take our $12 is our average price that we received for $12 a bunch. We subtracted our cost, $11.86, $14 profit. Okay, this is basic math, but 14 cents divided by $12, that gives you a 1% profit margin. All right. Ouch. So this is also if you sold every single bunch. All right. You're making $19.60 if you sold every single bunch, which maybe you didn't. So the last step in this, before we talk about increasing your profitability using this process, is to compare your actual costs in sales to these projections we just made. So this enterprise budget analysis, it really is just making projections. You're writing down what things on average, how long on average things take, how much on average things cost. But I like to keep track of my actual sales and then compare it to the cost that I had. So in this example, you can see I have my sales outlets listed here: farmers market, CSA, florists, and weddings. This is the number of bunches I sold over the year of 2021. This is actually not real. I just made this up, but let's say you sold 10 bunches at the farmers market, 10 at CSA, 10 to a florist, and 15 through weddings. And then you charge $15 to farmers market and CSA, $12 to your florist, and then $18 for weddings, which If you guys have different sales outlets, they do cost less to sell to a florist than it does at a farmer's market, so make sure you're pricing accordingly. And then you can see over here, so this is the actual revenue I brought in from stock in this example was $690. And that's 45 bunches. And I grew about a quarter bed, which means I made $415 minus 274, because that's 0.25 times the 100-foot bed. So you're just taking that quarter of a bed and just figuring out how much it actually costs versus a whole bed, which left me with a 40% profit margin. So that's way better than 1%, probably because I was charging more for it. So make sure you're taking your actuals and comparing it against what you're projecting here to see if it is coming out the same. Are they similar or different? Can you make changes? Anything like that? Yes.
You have a target profit margin that you're aiming for?
Every crop is different. And what I do on my farm is I make an index from most profitable to least profitable. And then I cut out the bottom half. That's what I did recently. I like to see that I'm making at least a 50% profit margin on everything. It is not always the case, but that's like what I would love to do. So in an ideal world, like my favorite crops, like ranunculus and dahlias, we're doing upwards of like in the 60s. So, and that's after a lot of years of doing this process and tweaking things, but it's totally possible to do. And it's different for every farm too.
I also have a quick question. So, as you know, like your sale prices are setting that up, especially for farmers market. If the sale price was lower, would you expect to sell more bouquets there? Then would that at the end turn out to be better?
Depends on your market. It depends on your market. Yeah, I mean, if you sell for cheaper, you might sell more bunches. For me, I haven't found that to be a great marketing strategy. I price things to fair market price. I mean, make sure it's actually a fair market price, and pretty much I price things for as much money as I can get. Especially if you're a small farm. If you're like me, I only grow 1 acre of flowers, and so I really have to maximize my profits. But if you're a really, really big farm and you're selling a lot of volume, it might be different for you. So it really depends on your business, and you can experiment with things. You can, at your market, you might try, 1 year pricing things a little bit lower, as long as you're covering your costs and making a profit, and then try pricing things higher, all one big experiment. So, that being said, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yes. Are you growing any perennials, and would you use the same projections?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do grow perennials on my farm, and you would make the same exact process, except you would take your initial planting, all of your expenses, and divide it over the number of years of life of that perennial. Like, for example, if you plant like 500 peonies, you're going to take your initial expenses and divide it by a 10-year lifespan of those peonies. And then you'll also put on this spreadsheet your annual costs. So like weeding, harvesting, whatever. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what affects your profitability? So if you, like in our first example, if we were only making 19 cents per bunch on that stock bed, 1% profit margin, how do you improve that? Well, there's only 2 ways. You can either increase your prices or decrease your costs. So I'm going to say that again. The only way to change your profitability is to increase your prices or decrease your costs, your expenses. So probably if you're, selling at market price, if you're, selling stock for like $15 to $18 a bunch retail, if you jack your price up to $25 a bunch, probably no one's going to buy it because that's just really expensive. It's outside of fair market cost. So instead of doing that, you need to find ways to root out waste. Whoops. Oh boy, messing things up here. Here we go. Find ways to root out waste and grow more efficiently to make crops more profitable. On a farm, time is your #1 expense. Labor is your #1 expense. So the more efficiently you can do things, the more money you're going to make. Seemingly small little adjustments that you can make that are virtually painless will make a really, really big difference. So like I said, with our harvest rate, harvest faster, go faster, time yourself, see how many bunches you can get in an hour. If you're like still harvesting, trying to sell like a lot of scabiosa and stuff, you're like cutting all those little wiry stems that take you 1,000,000 years and you only get like 3 bunches an hour, like you're probably not making money off of it unless you are doing like some really high-end wedding work or something where you can charge a lot. All right, replacing hand weeding with lean weed management. So using smart tools, like if you're a 1-acre farm like me, doing wire weeding or flame weeding or something like that, like you should not be hand weeding stuff unless it makes sense, which in a lot of cases it doesn't. Reducing distance of crop travel. So if you're moving like stuff from your greenhouse and you're driving it like 10 miles away to some piece of land that you rented, like that adds a lot to your costs. Eliminating pests and disease that decrease yields. The more yield you have, the more money you're going to make. Grow more in less space, so intensive spacing. Obviously the weather, we don't have a lot of control over that, but we can mitigate things. Leaving flowers unharvested, unsold in the field, you're literally throwing money away, okay? Fluctuations, pricing, lots of things. So I'm going to show you guys, just as an example, we're back to stock here. This is our same stock example, but we're just going to plant this bed a little bit differently. So has anybody heard of planting double stock per hole? Yeah. Okay, does anybody here do that on their farm? Who here grows stock? Just, no, not even that many of you. Well, I picked a great example, so. Well, this is just an example with stock, but you can use the same line of thinking to apply to all your crops, no matter what you grow. Not necessarily just changing your spacing, but changing the way that you grow things and just being more efficient in general. So we're going to take that 1 bed of stock and we're just going to double plant per hole. You can do that. I do it on my farm. So we go from 1,440 plants per bed to 2,880 plants per bed. So some of our costs are changing. So obviously we're using more trays, we're using a little bit more soil. Our expenditures go up a little bit. It's a little bit more time to seed and to transplant. However, a lot of our expenses are staying like pretty much the same. And now our expected yield, instead of 140 bunches, is 285 bunches. So looking at our total crop costs, that means that we are now making $734 per bed when it was $19.60. Okay, we went from a 1% profit margin to a 21% profit margin just from planting more plants in the same amount of space. Okay, so if you are planting things really far spaced apart, and you're probably gonna have a lot of weeds if you're doing that, try planting them a little bit closer. See what happens. Experiment with it. We do really, really close intensive spacing on our farm, and it's really paid off for us. Okay, so this is the same exact thing. It's just showing you per bunch up here, and then this is the per bed cost. So we went from spending $11.68 per bunch down to $9.42. We're still going to charge $12 a bunch, but maybe we'll just bump it up to 15, and that's going to increase our profit margin from 14 cents to $2.58 in our 21% profit margin. So do you guys see how just something small like that, growing more in the same amount of space, increasing your harvest rate, going faster with your harvests. If you use a lot of trays and you do a lot of seed starting, use them for a couple years in a row, stuff like that can make a big difference, right? Obviously, you don't want to spread disease, disinfect them or whatever, but that costs money too. So you got to figure out if it's worth your time or not. So some tips and tricks. This is a lot to keep track. If you're like a farm that grows like 100 different varieties, I don't know how you do it. Hats off to you. But that's a lot to keep track of every season. So my advice is, instead of trying to keep track of your time and your labor and materials associated with every single flower crop, just pick a few every season and try to keep track of a few of them, or just take your biggest sellers or your most important ones. Keeping that record-keeping notebook on hand at all times and making it a habit of writing down how much time things take at the end of every day. keeping track of sales, and then doing this process in the wintertime. Don't try to do it in the middle of the season. We all know how busy we are, how crazy it is. Usually every January I sit down and I go through, you know, my receipts and look at like how much time it took me to do things. And I sit down and do this during the season. The first time you do it, it's going to take a long time because you got to figure all those initial calculations out. But after that, it gets so much easier. Like it takes me no time at all to go through and just kind of do this per year.
Jen,
Right?
I have a question in the chat. Is it a
Oh,
good
yeah.
time? Okay. The woman asks, as a small farm, how do you make profit through wholesale and selling to florists?
You do this and make sure you make money. So as a small farm, how do you profit selling wholesale? Well, you might not be able to. So it depends. The key thing I think is to start with this process and then look at that column on the side where all of your expenses and your labor costs are and see what you can tweak. You can even go into this spreadsheet. Like, do I have another? No, let's go back here. So yeah, you can even go into our spreadsheet here. Why is it taking me so long to find? Here we go. Here, let me go back to the beginning. So you can look at, you know, all right, I spent 2.5 hours potting up, you know, can I do that faster? It took me, you know, however long to spray. Can I do that faster? Or can I eliminate my need for netting? I hate using netting. It takes so much time to put up. It takes so much time to harvest in. If you lose a few little stems on the side, is it worth it? Probably not. If your whole crop falls over, then yes. But you know, there's things that you can do. You can go through and look at every single thing here and ask yourself, like, what can I do better? What tasks can I eliminate? Can I use less materials or equipment? Can I buy cheaper materials and equipment? So yeah, I don't know. I think that's my best answer to that question. Sorry. You might be small farms. The smaller you are, the better off you are trying to get as much money as you can selling retail, in my opinion, unless you're like super specialized in something. But every farm is different, and that's the beauty of it. Every single flower farm in this room grows differently, does things differently. We have different techniques, we have different markets, we have different customers, and that's what's so fun about flower farming. You can do whatever you want. You can have whatever business you want. So yeah, this is a great process to see, you know, what markets might be best for you to enter or not do. So do you guys have any other questions? This is yes.
Before you did this, did you have any particular crop that you're like, I'm making bank on this? And you did the numbers and you were just destroyed because it just wasn't making it?
Everything. I don't want to say everything. I had no idea. I mean, I grew everything. I grew so many flowers. Like the list was so long. It was like probably nearly 100 varieties. It was a lot. So I was like, I'm just going to try everything. And like, people love variety and I'll have so much variety to put in mixed bouquets, but we don't really do mixed bouquets either anymore. And then when I sat down and did this, I didn't do it for every single crop. That's another thing that I should tell you is, you know, you can kind of do this process and for similar crops at similar spacings, you can gauge if that's going to be profitable for you or not. But I was surprised at a lot of the numbers. There's nothing that jumps out at me like one particular crop in particular, but we were able to increase our profit just by doing this process and seeing where we could make improvements. Like for dahlias, for example, a lot of people like to complain about dahlias. We sell the tubers, and with that additional income, even with all the extra labor, we're able to make like a really good profit on dahlias. So things like that, just figuring out what works and what doesn't. And like I said, every farm is different. But yeah, stock, I was like, oh, we don't make any money. How do we change that? So I would either have eliminated it, or for us, stock feels kind of like a weird gap in the year between like early spring flowers and late spring flowers where we don't have a lot. So we still grow it, but we put a lot of flowers in a small space and we like do it super efficiently. And so we're able to make money on it. So if you guys, I'll leave some time. We have a little bit more time for more questions at the end, but if you still need help with stuff like this. If you want more information about figuring out profitability, you know, this is like a lot of sitting down and working at spreadsheets and stuff, but figuring out how to do really efficient weed management or harvesting, like techniques and different tools that you can use to be really efficient and make more money on your farm. We are doing a workshop this summer. It's called 6-Figure Farming. And it's basically all about trying to make those 6 figures on your farm if you haven't gotten there yet. And we are working on a billable spreadsheet for this process that hopefully we'll have done by that time, where you can just like plug in your numbers and it'll like calculate everything for you. But if you guys are interested in that, you can go to my website, trademarksflowers.com. I also have a free record keeping guide on there, but it's only available through this probably like till Monday. So if you go to my website and sign up for our email list, you'll get a free record keeping template like that one I showed you at the beginning. I'm changing my website next week, so it's gonna go away. So if you're interested in it, just hop on there sometime before like Monday or Tuesday-ish. And then, yeah, so I don't want to take up too much time with this, but the workshop that we're going to do is the 24th through the 26th. It's at our farm in Clifton Springs. We'll show you guys how we do things, all about everything. We're going to show you tons of stuff, but basically learning all the skills that you really need to take your farm, if you're a hobby farm or if you're not making as much money as you want, to a profitable business and even a full-time business if that's something that you're not doing and you want to be doing in the future. I don't know any other places that do this, like an in-person workshop where you can actually try out things on the farm. Like you could try different tools and actually like get your hands dirty doing some stuff, but we're going over all of this. So it's a lot of business stuff as well as growing efficiently, lean management. And then we also have a half day optional where we're going to cover everything about growing in hoop houses, hoop house management, and season extension, which was really key for me in having a profitable farm. But most importantly, you get to make farmer friends, which everybody loves making farmer friends. At least I do. You know, we're so like isolated in our own little farms everywhere. It's really nice just to make friends with other farmers that you can bounce ideas off of. Like you could do your enterprise budget analysis, be like, hey, I'm only making like 10 cents a bunch of my stock. What are you making? You know, you could bounce ideas and see where you are and see, you know, just talk to people.
So Jenny will be, there's a table set up where she'll have her information and you can drop in and talk to her, and Miranda will be there as well. When we head over to the other building for lunch, she'll see all that out there.
Yeah, I have some flyers over there and some business cards if you guys want, but there's some information here if you want, or you go to my website. And then just a quick little thing about ASCFG. Obviously, Cornell Cooperative Extension is an amazing resource for you guys. Absolutely incredible for putting on things like this, which not a lot of places can do. But if you guys aren't a part of the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, it's a great organization. I'm the Northeast Regional Director. So if you guys have any questions about it, come ask me afterwards. But you guys did it! Yay! If you want more information that's not for me, these books are really great for farming books about business and finances. So those are listed on your little printouts that you got. And other than that, that's me, that's my information. Trademarksflowers.com. My email is hello@trademarksflowers.com. And then our Instagram is Trademarks Flower Farm. So if you guys want to follow along, if you have questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to me through any of those outlets. Probably email is best through my website. And then if there's any other questions, I'll take those. Otherwise, we are just about to, I think, lunchtime, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's over in Barrel Hall where you registered. Okay. Okay, and then we will see you back here at, I believe the next one is at 12:40. Or no, is it 1:40? Yeah, so we got a nice plenary luncheon, plenary speaker and luncheon ahead of us. So we will see you online people back at about 1:40.
Nice. Thank you guys. I hope this was useful and helpful. So let me know if you have questions.
Getting lots of thank yous in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you guys.